Hello, welcome to Rants of a Naija Chic. So today I'm going to be doing a review / comparison of another series. So in my previous video, I had said I was going to do a comparison between Far From Home and the South African series Blood and Water that Far From Home kept getting compared to when it dropped. So if you've watched both of the series, you'll understand why. But if you've not watched it, I think this will also give you kind of an idea. It's better you go and watch my previous video, but if you don't, this one will still make sense. So just stay with us, right? First of all, I'm going to do a synopsis of what Blood and Water is about. Blood and Water is an original Netflix series in South Africa. It's actually in its 3rd season that just dropped in December last year. So it's Far From Home is newer than Blood and Water. You know, that's where the comparison started, because Blood and Water existed before Far From Home. It centers around Puleng and Fikile. So Puleng, in her family, when she was born, they told her, that she had an older sister that was kidnapped. So the whole show is about Puleng trying to find her sister, and she has to go and enroll in this school with this girl that she suspected was her sister. And then they go through this whole thing where, you know, it just like in Far From Home, it's a school, there were other characters there. So the parents of these other people are now involved in a gang, and a whole lot of things happen. In as much as this is a review, and I don't want to give away everything, because I want you to still go back and watch either of the series for yourselves. So maybe I'm just going to talk about each of the characters and compare them to the characters in Far From Home. So we see how they all stack up and how the storyline stacks up. But before I do the characters, let's do the storyline. In Blood and Water is still about young adults. Puleng is trying to find her sister, so to give her family that kind of peace, that kind of closure. And then the whole other dark side now comes up, where you have the gang aspect. You find out that her sister was actually kidnapped by like a gang, and they were actually into trafficking girls and stuff like that. Where Far From Home is about Ishaya trying to elevate himself, trying to become somebody, and he's trying to go to this school to try to further his dreams in art and all that. But there's also a school setting, and there's also a gang setting as well, where you have him trying to sell drugs for, you know, the bad guys and stuff like that. So if you want to compare the storylines, for me, the storyline is quite different. The only thing that is similar for me in the storyline is just the ages of the adults we're dealing with. That's the only thing that is similar to me. But the storyline, the bare bones of the storyline itself, they are two different things. They're not even in the same WhatsApp group, in my opinion. The stories are different. Yes, there is a gang. Yes, there is a school. But to me, that's where the storyline, you know, that's where the similarities stop for me. Now let's compare the casts themselves to see where they sort of meet. In Blood and Water, the main, what's the word? Is it protagonist? I mean antagonist? I didn't pay attention in literature, I'm sorry. But the main character is Puleng. And Puleng, I could liken Puleng to also the main character in Far From Home, who is Ishaya. Both of them, okay, Ishaya was from a very poor background, whereas Puleng is from, I think, a middle class family. At least his family had money to send her to the school. Ishaya, on the other hand, had to go into the school via cheating and on a scholarship. There was no money at all to even buy uniform on Ishaya's part. Boy and girl, so there's a difference in there, but their storylines are also similar in the sense that I found in Puleng's, throughout Blood and Water, in Puleng's quest to find her sister, she got kind of selfish, and she didn't consider the people around her. She did not consider her friends. She did not consider her mother, her dad, the situation her dad got going on. I find her to be similar to Ishaya in that aspect. In Ishaya's quest to make it in his art dreams, Ishaya was so selfish. His friend was getting beaten up because Ishaya was doing anyhow. He wasn't considerate of his family. He wasn't considerate of his sister's feeling. So I find that they are sort of similar in that aspect. And then you have the second girl in Blood and Water, Fikile, who was the kidnapped sister, Puleng's kidnapped sister. I don't see, okay, I think for her, I'll compare her to Carmen in Blood and Water. She was the rich girl from the very rich home. She was sort of calm, but she also had a bite to her. And she was the queen, so to say, in the school, just like Carmen was the queen in the school. I mean, Carmen's parents controlled, I think Carmen's parents were on the board in Far From Home, as well as Fikile's parents were on the board in Blood and Water. So they're both of them really, to me, both of them are very similar to each other. And then you also have Karibo in Blood and Water. If I were to compare Karibo to any character in Far From Home, I think I would also compare him to Atlas, who was also Carmen's boyfriend, and Karibo was also Fikile's. They dated at one point, even though I think we didn't see that. You know, I'll compare him to Atlas again, but not completely. But he was also, you know, the king of the school. He was also from a good home, even though in Atlas' case, in Far From Home, he was from a good home. But I think the mom, at a certain point, the mom lost what do you call it, there was no more money again. But yeah, I'll still compare them. They are similar, but not so similar per se, but another character in Blood and Water that I really could see comparing up to any character in Far From Home was Wade, who to me I would compare to Frank, who was Ishaya's friend in Far From Home. Wade is in Blood and Water, let's not get confused. So Wade was the studious person, you know, same as Frank. But again, they are similar but not so similar, because in Wade's case, his mom was the principal of the school, but in Frank's case, in Far From Home, the mom was well-to-do, like was among the top echelon of the society. So they're similar but not so similar. And then you have Zama, who was my favorite character in Blood and Water. I would compare her completely to Genoveva's character in Far From Home. Totally the same attitude. Honestly, now this character I can say is very similar, and they kill their parts. Don't get me wrong, both of them, they kill their parts. Funny enough, Zama is also my favorite character in Blood and Water, as well as Genoveva's character in Far From Home. Both of them very lively girls, and they were just friends. The only difference I would say would be Zama was not from a well-to-do home, whereas Genoveva was from like a wealthy family. And then you have Chris in Blood and Water. Chris is like Reggie in Far From Home. Everybody who has watched Far From Home knows Reggie. I mean, he was the wealthy boy. He kind of like zones out in school. He's not interested in what people are doing there. His own is about partying. If you've watched any of the series, you know that Chris was also having parties in his house, as well as Reggie was having parties in his house. They kind of looked like if their parents were not around, which was the same thing in both families. So that's it for Chris. Another main character in Blood and Water was Wendy, and I don't think there's any character in Far From Home that I would compare Wendy to. Maybe Carmen's friend, but their stories were not the same. But in a way, I can see it in a way, because Wendy's mom was a minister, so that made her to have this prim and proper attitude. And on Carmen's friend's side, I'm sorry I forget her name, on Carmen's friend's side, she was the daughter of a pastor, so she tried to, you know, have this prim and proper again, but their stories are not the same, so I wouldn't say they're the same. Now, there are so many other characters, I cannot get to each and every one of them, but the main thing that I feel is making people compare Far From Home and Blood and Water is basically the fact that both of them happen mostly in schools, A-level type schools. They're not really high schools, but they're not really high schools / secondary school, but they're not also like universities. They wear uniforms, and their uniforms was almost similar. They wear uniforms as well. That is where, for me, the comparison really centers. And then maybe the fact that there was also the underlying gang situation. I mean, there was also a kidnapping situation in Far From Home, as well as Fikile being kidnapped at birth. For me, just the gang element and the school element is where the similarities end. Do I think Far From Home is a rip-off of Blood and Water? Not necessarily. Do I think that Far From Home was inspired by Blood and Water? Absolutely. But Blood and Water is a reflection of South Africa. Far From Home is a reflection of Nigeria. I forgot to add this. There was also the drug element. That also makes them similar. I mean, Isha was busy peddling drugs up and down. And then there was this girl also in Far From Home that was also peddling drugs. But again, just the drug element was the same thing, because the girl's story and Ishaya's story was not the same, right? So yeah, do I think it was a ripoff? No. Do I think it was inspired by? Yes. Should you watch the two series? Absolutely. Now, which one do I prefer? In Blood and Water, I was on the edge of my seat. You know how when you're watching a series, you cannot sleep. You want to watch the next episode because things are happening. That's how I was in Blood and Water. I was on the edge of my seat. The way I ran through that whole episode, like I didn't start it when everybody started it. So I watched season 1, 2, 3 at the same time. The way I ran through, because I needed to know what happened. That's how I was on the edge of my seat. Far From Home didn't really keep me on the edge of my seat. I was more or less like, let me just finish it and go. Not like it wasn't interesting. It was very interesting, but I was, let me finish it and go. I feel like if there's a season 4 of Blood and Water, I'm more eager to see a season 2 from Far From Home, because I know that there's a lot of potential for where that story can go, than I am eager to see a season 4 for Blood and Water, because I feel like most of the storyline has been played out. So that's it for me. If you've not watched any of the two series, I think you should watch it if you have spare time. And if you have watched it, I know for sure that there are things that I missed out to say. So let us talk in the comments. What did you like about this one, and what did you not like about the other one, or vice versa? So let's talk in the comments and let me know which one was your favorite. If I were to rate it against each other, my previous rating for Far From Home was 5/10. But looking at Far From Home versus Blood and Water, I think I would give Blood and Water a 10/10, and I would give Far From Home a 6.5/10. The acting was good in both series. The production was superb in both series. The casting was awesome in both series. The storyline was good in both series, but where Blood and Water trumps Far From Home for me is they gave us details. They gave us more details than Far From Home. But yeah, that's it for me for comparison of the two series, and I'll see you next time on Rants of a Naija Chick. Bye.